I'm Ruby Jones, and you're listening to 7am. The scenes in Belfast this week have been horrifying to watch. Ugly clashes, masked men rioting in the streets, immigrant families begging neighbours to hide their children, fearing for their safety. Politicians, far-right agitators, and billionaire Elon Musk have been accused of sparking the riots, weaponising a brutal stabbing attack to ramp up anti-migrant rhetoric and whip protesters into a frenzy. Today, British journalist and host of the newsagents Emily Maitlis on the far-right forces at play in the UK and why the Belfast riots should serve as a warning to Australia and the world. It's Friday, June 12th. Emily, welcome to 7am. Great to have you on the show.
Lovely to be here, Ruby.
So to begin with, what we've been seeing in Belfast in Northern Ireland over the past day or so, there's been cars torched, homes set alight, people forced to flee. Describe to me what's been happening on the ground.
Yeah, it all started really late Monday night when a video began circulating online, which was pretty graphic. I mean, for those who are squeamish, I don't want to spell this out too vividly, but essentially a man was being pinned to the ground, a victim was on his back, and he was essentially being stabbed in the back of the head. The police were called instantly, and a passerby saw what was going on in his car and actually attacked the attacker with his son's kind of, hockey stick bat, a hurling bat. And that was really what saved this man's life. But as you can imagine, it has kicked off an extraordinary sense of panic and horror amongst the residents of this sort of quiet Belfast suburb, not really understanding where this had come from and what it was about. And at first, the rumours started circulating that the man was Somalian. We then learned that actually he was from Sudan, and he had been one of those who had escaped from the civil war in Sudan and been given this leave to remain, a 5-year leave to remain. What has essentially started, particularly in online forums and over X and Twitter, with the help of Musk, who is always a fueler of these flames, is a call for people to protest immigrants, protest migrants, protest illegal immigrants.
Homes were targeted and burned. Families had to be led to safety through the flames, rescued by emergency services, risking their lives in the most dangerous situation.
And that has been what's brought people out onto the streets. We've seen, as you say, houses torched, a bus torched, burnt down.
On Newtonards Road, around 150 masked men blocked traffic, then set fire to bins, making burning barricades.
There were hours of flames, destruction and intimidation, much of it directed at migrants.
There have been attacks and a sense of real unrest for many of those residents living around the area and wider throughout the city of Belfast, that they are not safe in their homes.
I was not able to take my son to school because I don't know if we'll be able to reach the school. So we are locked in the house with my wife and my 3 children. We don't know how to come out. Because
of the anger that this particular crime has really triggered.
Until last night, Samaya and Stella were Belfast housemates. They are student nurses from Uganda.
Can I really be able to stay here? Will I be safe because of what happened and the whole experience? So just know I'm scared.
As you can see, the whole issue is basically a tinderbox for the parties, particularly of the right, who want to make this about illegal immigration, even though it isn't. From what we understand, the man was an asylum seeker. But I think there is a danger, and many Northern Ireland politicians feel that it is being weaponised by parties of the right now, particularly because immigration as a whole in the UK, legal immigration, has gone down. The numbers have gone down. And there are parties of the right, particularly Reform, particularly Restore, the sort of sister party of Reform, feel that their power starts to wane when the British public don't care as much about immigration.
And it seems there's not even a week that goes by now when we don't read of some horrific mass sexual assault or something like that that has been committed by somebody who just should not be in Britain. I think the fear is this stuff gets worse. Unless you give people hope, this stuff will get worse.
So, the violence on the streets overnight is really a manifestation of, I think, so many things. The infiltration of big money and political actors, not least Elon Musk, and the politicians who are trying to both respond to what happened and not feel that they are taken down a road where they are talking now about immigration and illegal immigration when that wasn't fundamentally at the heart of this.
And you mentioned Elon Musk, who shared not only details of the attack itself, but commentary by far-right politicians and commentators. So how much of a factor was that? What role did that play in terms of the very fast escalation that we saw and these riots coming about?
Look, the question you're asking is, how much of a factor does the richest man in the world, with all his Nazi friends, getting involved in what is essentially a local crime, play right now in British politics or indeed in world politics? It was a problem for the German elections when Elon Musk jumped in and wanted the AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland, to win. It was a problem, for Hungary when we saw Elon Musk and Trump and Vance try and support Orban and keep him in power. This is what happens when all the wealth in the world is going into trying to manipulate democracies and politics. And that is what happens when he says, this is an invasion, go and do what you need to do. I mean, that word invasion was used overnight. It was used by J.D. Vance at the weekend to talk about another crime, the murder of Henry Novak, which came about last week.
Posting online, J.D. Vance said this: Henry Novak died the same way as civilization dies, abandoned, handcuffed by authorities who neither trusted nor cared for him, and accused of hate crimes he did not commit. His murder is as tragic as it is enraging. He should be alive today, and he would be if the last few generations of European elites had stood their ground against the politics of self-hatred and the mass invasion of migrants.
And when you start using words like invasion and you have the wealth to throw this stuff around, then yes, what you're doing is you're inciting people out onto the streets. It wasn't just Belfast, it was parts of Scotland, it was Southampton. And, a lot of the mainstream parties have been slower to realise this is what globalisation looks like in 2026. It's not about open trade borders. It's about sort of fascist ideologies creeping from, places of extreme wealth and stretching their tentacles into parts of the world where, frankly, people might not welcome them, but they think that they're speaking to a moment because they're scared. When people are scared, they will listen. And I think that is a frightening place to be right now for all of those reasons.
What is it like within the UK watching that happen, having people like Musk, like J.D. Vance, others in the global right stoke this tension?
There's a sort of an arrogance, I think, with your own country. We kind of think we've got our heads screwed on. We think that we are kind of rational, level-headed, sensible, common sense people. We see all the major parties speaking out against Musk, all the major parties saying to Trump, actually, don't boss us around. You can do your war, we'll do ours. And so there is, I think, a sort of belief that we will weather this. It's a sort of core and fundamental belief, for British people that we will not have our democracies dictated by other people. But frankly, when there is so much money coming into this, money buys disinformation and it spreads disinformation. And the more that you can tell people that their homes are being invaded and that they're not safe in their beds and that this wasn't a one-off terrible, terrible crime, but it is kind of being repeated on a loop around the country, which is in essence, where this disinformation is meant to be taking people, it becomes a really hard battle to fight, right? You are up against a man who whose flotation is going to make him, 1.75 trillion pounds or dollars, if the figure's right. And I think it's a really big question. How do you fight disinformation when it comes with that much wealth behind it?
Coming up, why Belfast should serve as a warning for Australia. Can we talk a little about the political response so far? So the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, for instance...
Nations depend on rules. Fair rules.
He condemned racist violence, but he also has recently used language like taking back control of our borders, said that Britain risked becoming an island of strangers.
Without them, we risk becoming an island of strangers, not a nation that walks forward together.
Tell me what you make of the way that he is talking right now.
The Island of Strangers speech was one that he regretted, I think, almost instantly. And I think Starmer has been trying to find his level, as most mainstream politicians have, frankly, between understanding people's genuine concerns about the level of migration, particularly the level of illegal migration, what that might be doing to public services, and also trying to show leadership on an issue where there is so much disinformation circulating. So, I mean, frankly, the fact that this man, who the perpetrator in Belfast, who has now been arrested and charged, came from Sudan, whether we like it or not, will now open up a debate, I imagine, about how the UK responds to asylum seekers, because the number of people from Sudan, from that dreadful civil war, the asylum policy has adapted to accommodate those people. Now, the Reform Party, the chairman Zia Youssef, has made very clear that Reform would say no visas to Sudan. And it's not so long ago that we were hearing Trump's Muslim ban in 2017, when he said there are 5 countries, I'm not going to give anyone visas if you come from there. We found that shocking a decade ago. The world was like, what are you doing? You can't just ban entire people, entire countries. And he said, watch me, yes, I can. And I guess Reform is going down that route. And, are we going to say that asylum seekers who come from war-torn countries are not welcome here? Whether it's Syria, whether it's Sudan. I mean, would the same apply for Afghanistan? If the Taliban's in charge, but we say, well, you're still a sort of deeply damaged country. We're not going to take people from Afghanistan. We're not going to take people from Iraq. I don't know. I think we are sort of being really pushed into having a whole debate now about asylum.
We all condemn, of course, the appalling violence in Belfast last night after the horrific attack on Monday. But this Prime Minister is in denial of the rising despair across the country over his failure to stop the boats and related criminality. His failure to recognise two-tier policing.
And here in Australia, we've seen a rise in anti-migration sentiment. One Nation, which has been compared to Reform, is rising dramatically in popularity. So watching what's happening in the UK and in Belfast right now, it does seem like we should be looking at it like a warning.
Look, as I said, this is a globalised movement, right? I mean, we can kid ourselves that these are sort of insurgent parties sort of coming from grassroots bases. They're not. This is AstroTurf. In other words, this is the creation of a grassroots. It's meant to look like a grassroots. It's meant to have its sort of heart in communities. It doesn't. It's a global movement which links up some of the world's billionaires, most powerful ideologues and most powerful voices into what is essentially a global movement now, which is trying to, fundamentally push democracies out and take us to a much more hardline and possibly, in many cases, authoritarian place.
Well, Emily, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me, Ruby.
Also in the news, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese isn't ruling out extending the fuel excise cut following the US and Israel resuming strikes in the Middle East. The 26.3 cent per litre cut is due to expire at the end of June. Prime Minister Albanese says he's deeply concerned by the escalation in Iran, citing the human impact and the global economic implications, and says the government will keep working to secure more fuel for Australia, with more stockpiles in the country now than before the war broke out. And state and territory disability ministers have lashed the federal government's planned NDIS overhaul, accusing the Albanese government of breaching commitments made at National Cabinet. They say around 300,000 people could be pushed off or blocked from accessing the scheme before alternative state-run supports are in place. Ministers are warning people with disability could end up in hospitals, inappropriate settings, or with no services at all. I'm Ruby Jones. Thanks for listening.